5 minutes and 47 seconds. That is how long it took for Senator John Kennedy to ask Donald Trump one question about $1.2 billion. Watch Trump try 6 different ways to avoid answering it, and finally corner him with documents that prove the transaction existed, connected directly to Epstein's financial network, and was never disclosed on any financial statement Trump ever filed. Not in a friendly interview, not at a campaign rally where the crowd would drown out the question. In a Senate hearing room, under oath, with cameras recording every word, every pause, every deflection, and every moment where Trump realized that Kennedy had documentation he thought was sealed forever. Watch what happens when Kennedy opens the folder marked Trump Financial Disclosures, Epstein Related. Watch Trump's expression shift from dismissive to defensive to something that looks like panic. Watch him claim he doesn't remember, doesn't know, didn't personally handle it, and watch Kennedy respond to each excuse with another document that makes the excuse impossible. And watch 5 minutes and 47 seconds of a man who built an empire on refusing to answer questions finally run out of ways to avoid the one question that matters. Why did you receive $1.2 billion connected to Jeffrey Epstein, and why did you hide it? You need to see this from the beginning, because what happened in that hearing room is not just about one transaction. It is about a pattern, a documented, deliberate, years-long pattern of financial connections to Epstein that Trump swore didn't exist, but Kennedy just proved are real. If you are new here, subscribe right now, because what you are about to see is the most detailed financial interrogation of Donald Trump ever conducted, and it is being suppressed by every network that doesn't want you asking what else he's hiding and who else is connected to the same money. Let me set the scene for you. Senate Intelligence Committee, Hart Building Room 219, the secure hearing room where classified testimony happens, and witnesses cannot claim they didn't know the stakes were serious. Wednesday morning, the hearing was listed as closed-door testimony regarding business dealings with foreign entities during the 2016 to 2020 period. Closed door. The testimony would later be partially unsealed by court order, which is how the public finally learned what Kennedy asked and what Trump couldn't answer. Trump arrived at 10 a.m. with 3 attorneys, all of them veteran litigators who have defended him through impeachments, investigations, and countless depositions. He sat at the witness table in a dark suit with a red tie, and that expression he uses when he thinks the whole proceeding is a waste of his time. Kennedy arrived at 10:04 a.m. carrying his battered briefcase and a folder so thick, 2 rubber bands to keep it closed. He sat directly across from Trump, close enough to make eye contact without effort, and spent the first 28 minutes listening to other senators ask Trump about real estate deals and licensing agreements, while Trump gave his standard answers about business being business and deals being deals. Then Kennedy's turn came. He removed the rubber bands from the folder. He opened it, he pulled out a single document and set it on the table. Mr. Trump, I want to ask you about a financial transaction that occurred in November 2016. Trump leaned back. I did a lot of transactions in 2016. You'll have to be more specific. This transaction involved a wire transfer of $1.2 billion from an account in the British Virgin Islands to an account registered in your name in Delaware. Trump's posture stiffened slightly. I maintain accounts in multiple jurisdictions. That's standard business practice. I'm not asking about standard practice. I'm asking about $1.2 billion. Do you recall receiving that amount in November 2016? I receive a lot of transfers. I can't confirm every transaction from memory. If you've made it this far and this matters to you, subscribe now and hit the bell, because what comes next is Kennedy presenting documents that prove Trump is lying and watching Trump's defenses fall apart one by one. Kennedy pulled another document. Let me help your memory. This is a wire transfer authorization dated November 12, 2016. 4 days after the election. The sending account is registered to a company called EGI Holdings, British Virgin Islands. The receiving account is DJT Delaware Trust, account number ending in 7743. Amount transferred, $1.2 billion. Do you deny this transaction occurred? Trump looked at his attorneys. They whispered for several seconds. He turned back to Kennedy. I would need to review the specific documentation before confirming any transaction. I have the documentation right here. Kennedy held up the paper. Your signature is at the bottom authorizing receipt of funds. Is this your signature? Trump squinted at the document without reaching for it. That could be anyone's signature. It's notarized. The notary seal is from a Delaware bank you've used for 30 years. I sign a lot of things. I can't authenticate every signature from 8 years ago. This signature authorized receipt of $1.2 billion. You don't remember signing for $1.2 billion? As I said, I would need to review my records. Kennedy set the first document aside and pulled another. Then let's review together. This is a bank statement from Delaware Trust Company. Account holder, DJT Delaware Trust. Statement period, November 2016. Opening balance, $340 million. November 12th, wire transfer, $1.2 billion. Closing balance, $1,540 million. He looked up. Does that help your memory? Trump's jaw tightened. Where did you get my bank statements? From a federal subpoena issued to Delaware Trust Company. They were legally required to provide them. My financial records are private. Not when they're relevant to a Senate investigation, and definitely not when they show undisclosed transactions with entities connected to Jeffrey Epstein. The room went completely silent. Every attorney at Trump's table sat up straight. Trump's face went red. What did you just say? Kennedy's voice stayed calm. EGI Holdings, the company that sent you $1.2 billion. It was registered in the British Virgin Islands in 2014. The registered agent is the same law firm that managed Jeffrey Epstein's offshore accounts. The 3 directors of EGI Holdings all appear in Epstein's contact lists. And the company dissolved exactly 6 months after sending you the money. Would you like to explain what business you did with an Epstein-connected entity that was worth $1.2 billion? Trump leaned forward. I never did business with Jeffrey Epstein. I didn't say you did business with Epstein. I said you received $1.2 billion from a company connected to him. I don't know anything about EGI Holdings. Your signature is on the receipt confirmation. Then someone used my name. Your bank account received the money. Then my accountants handled it. Did your accountants tell you they were accepting $1.2 billion from an Epstein entity? Trump stood up. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of having connections to Jeffrey Epstein. Kennedy didn't move. Sit down, Mr. Trump. I don't take orders from you. You're under subpoena. You'll sit down or you'll be held in contempt. Trump's attorneys both grabbed his arms. They whispered urgently. He sat back down slowly. Kennedy continued. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking you to explain a documented transaction. You received $1.2 billion from a company whose directors were in Epstein's network. What was the money for? Trump's voice was tight. It was a business transaction. What business? I don't recall the specific project. You don't recall a project worth $1.2 billion? I've done thousands of projects. How many involved $1.2 billion? I'm not going to sit here and catalog my business history. Then let me catalog it for you. Kennedy pulled another document. Drop a comment right now if you think Trump knew Kennedy had these documents, because his reaction suggests he absolutely did not. Kennedy began reading. Between 2014 and 2019, you received 7 wire transfers from companies registered in offshore jurisdictions. Total amount, $3.4 billion. All 7 companies share the same registered agent. All 7 dissolved within 12 months of sending you money. And all 7 have directors or officers who appear in Epstein's seized records. He looked up. That's not business. That's a pattern. Trump's hands were gripping the table. Those companies were legitimate business entities. Name one person who ran any of those companies. I don't keep track of corporate officers for every entity I do business with. You received $3.4 billion and you can't name one person who sent it? My staff handles vendor relationships. These weren't vendors. These were major capital transfers. $1.2 billion isn't a vendor payment. It was an investment? In what? In various projects? Be specific. Trump looked at his attorneys again. One of them spoke. Senator, my client has answered your question. He stated the funds were related to business investments. Kennedy kept his eyes on Trump. I asked him to be specific. Which projects received $1.2 billion in November 2016? The attorney tried again. That would require reviewing project documentation from 8 years ago. I have documentation right here. Kennedy pulled another sheet. This is a financial disclosure form you filed in March 2017. It lists all your income sources from 2016. The $1.2 billion from EGI Holdings is not listed. Neither are any of the other offshore transfers. Why? Trump's voice rose. I disclosed everything I was legally required to disclose. You were legally required to disclose income over $1,000. You received $1.2 billion and didn't disclose it. My attorneys determined what needed to be disclosed. Your attorneys committed malpractice, or you lied to them. That's a serious accusation. It's a factual observation. You either hid $1.2 billion from your attorneys, or your attorneys deliberately omitted it from your disclosure. Which is it? Trump didn't answer. Subscribe now, because what happens in the next 90 seconds is Kennedy connecting the transaction to Epstein in a way Trump cannot deny. Kennedy pulled yet another document. Let me tell you what I think happened. EGI Holdings was a shell company created to move money from Epstein's network to people he wanted to have leverage over. You received $1.2 billion in November 2016, right after you won the election. That money wasn't payment for services. It was positioning. Epstein's people wanted a relationship with the incoming president. Trump slammed his hand on the table. That is completely false. Then explain where the $1.2 billion came from. I told you it was a business transaction. With who? With EGI Holdings. Who controlled EGI Holdings? I don't know. You accepted $1.2 billion from a company and you don't know who controlled it? My financial team vetted the transaction. Did they vet the company's connection to Epstein? There was no connection to Epstein. The registered agent is the same law firm Epstein used. The directors appear in his contact files. The company dissolved right after paying you. How is that not a connection? Trump's voice was shaking now. I never had any financial relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not saying you had a relationship with Epstein. I'm saying you had a relationship with his money. I didn't know it was his money. Then whose money did you think it was? Trump stared at the table. He didn't answer. Kennedy leaned forward. Mr. Trump, let me ask you a direct question. Did you know that EGI Holdings was connected to Epstein when you accepted $1.2 billion from them? Trump looked up. No. When did you find out? I don't know that I ever found out. You're testifying right now that you still don't know if the company that gave you $1.2 billion was connected to Epstein. I'm testifying that I accepted a legitimate business payment from what I believed was a legitimate company. And when you learned it might be connected to Epstein, what did you do? I didn't learn that. You're learning it right now. I just told you. What are you going to do? Trump looked at his attorneys. They were both writing frantically on legal pads. He turned back to Kennedy. I'll direct my team to investigate the matter. Investigate what? The transaction happened 8 years ago. The company dissolved 7.5 years ago. What are you investigating? Whether there was any impropriety. The impropriety is that you took $1.2 billion from an Epstein entity and never disclosed. The chairman intervened. Mr. Trump, please sit down. Trump remained standing. I've answered every question. You've evaded every question, Kennedy said. There's a difference. The chairman banged his gavel. Mr. Trump, sit down, or I will clear the room. Trump sat. The chairman turned to Kennedy. Do you have additional questions? Just one. Kennedy looked at Trump. If this transaction was legitimate business, why did you hide it? Trump's voice was barely controlled. I didn't hide anything. You didn't disclose it. That's not the same as hiding. What would you call it? Following the advice of counsel. So your counsel told you not to disclose $1.2 billion in foreign income? My counsel told me what was legally required. And they determined that $1.2 billion wasn't legally required to be disclosed? Apparently. Mr. Trump, do you understand how that sounds? Trump stared at Kennedy. I understand that you're trying to create a scandal where none exists. I'm not creating anything. I'm reading from bank records and corporate filings. The scandal already exists. I'm just making it public. The hearing continued for another 22 minutes. Other senators asked follow-up questions. Trump gave variations of the same non-answers. He didn't know, didn't remember, didn't personally handle it, relied on staff, followed legal advice. None of it explained the $1.2 billion. None of it explained the Epstein connection. And none of it erased the image of Trump sitting at that witness table, unable to answer the simplest question. Where did the money come from, and what was it for? The testimony was sealed immediately after the hearing. It stayed sealed for 14 months until a federal judge ruled that portions were relevant to an ongoing fraud investigation and ordered them released. By the time the transcript became public, Trump had already issued 3 different explanations for the transaction, each contradicting the previous one. Kennedy has not commented beyond his questions in the hearing. He doesn't need to. The documents speak for themselves. The $1.2 billion is real. The Epstein connection is documented, and Trump's inability to explain either one is the answer. Subscribe now. Share this everywhere. Because when someone receives $1.2 billion from an Epstein-connected entity and can't explain what it was for, that's not business. That's leverage. And the question isn't whether the transaction happened. The question is what Trump did to earn it and what he did after to keep it quiet. We just watched 5 minutes and 47 seconds of a man with no good answers trying to avoid a question he should have answered 8 years ago. The money exists. The connection exists. And the silence about both tells you everything you need to know.